All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call to order the workshop for the Lee County Board of County Commissioners. It is 1:31, and today is August 15th. Let's begin by kind of setting the scene for why we're here today. So we're having a workshop today to review the Recovery Task Force and get an update from the Recovery Task Force about the work that's been completed so far, and obviously what we can expect at the end of the process. Speaking real quickly in I guess some introductory remarks. I remember when Hurricane Ian hit last year, September 28th, right? It became very clear to, I think, the entire Board of County Commissioners last year. All of us said that this work that we do over the next year to try and help the community come back is going to be the most important work that we do as a group of elected officials, and that it was a job that we needed to have plenty of public input on. And so we all set out on this path of having a long-term recovery task force. And so today I'm eager to hear the update as to what they've accomplished so far and what we can look forward to in the coming months. And with that, I'd like to ask our county manager to make a few comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you stated, on August 1st, we had a board meeting, and at that board meeting, you gave us direction to have a recovery task force update. So today, what we're going to do, we're going to start off with BoC recovery efforts, and Glenn Sire will start that discussion, and following that, we will go into the task force itself, and I believe Dr. Martin will start that conversation. So with that, Glenn.
Wait, real quick, before we start with the county presentations, you told me before, and I quickly forgot, we do have overflow seating for anybody who's looking for it in the green room across the hall, and now I have accomplished that task, so there you go.
Thank you. Glenn.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Good afternoon, everyone. We will be brief in our presentation so that we can get to the main event, but we have been asked to just set the stage for this conversation to talk a little bit about the BoCC's responsibilities regarding hurricane recovery efforts. Turn it over to the task force for their presentation, and finally to the board for discussion and any direction the board wants to provide. If we were going to talk about Lee County BoCC response, recovery, resiliency, that could be an all-day workshop in and of itself. We've tried to just show how all-encompassing this is, and with the direction that the board has given us from the days that we activated the EOC until now, we have been able as an organization to accomplish many things thus far, and it really is an all-encompassing effort. It involves every aspect of our organization, every staff level. It doesn't matter if you're talking about immediate response in terms of emergency management coordination, debris removal, housing assistance, what that might be. The entire organization was and still is engaged. We now, of course, have moved really to the recovery phase, and for us, a lot of that encompasses things like cost recovery. And we have been wildly successful as a community in advocating for our needs. The state has thus far appropriated a total of about $3 billion for hurricane recovery assistance. And while that is for Ian and Nicole and all of the jurisdictions impacted, Lee County, of course, will be the primary benefactor of these funds. And that is thanks to the effort of so many people in this room today. At the federal level, we expect to be the recipient of about $1.5 billion in total, and that is to Lee County and its municipalities. This includes the Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Funds, of course, but it's also FEMA Public Assistance, it's Federal Highway Administration, Natural Resource Conservation Service, and some other agencies. Now, because the focus of this meeting is planning, we do want to drill down on two particular aspects of things that the county has underway that impact recovery. And the first is resiliency focused. We do have a critical asset study underway that is being conducted according to state requirements to be able to draw down Florida resiliency funding. And so as the slide says, we are assessing all of our regionally significant assets for vulnerabilities And that will morph ultimately into studies to give us some engineering solutions to make our community more resilient in terms of mitigating against future events. This study has been funded primarily by the state, although some of that is passed through funds from the federal government in terms of CDBG mitigation dollars. The board has approved a couple of different stages or phases of this study. It started out as a coastal vulnerability analysis. We've been able to broaden that to encompass the entire county at this point, and it does include the municipalities. We are working with all of the jurisdictions. They supply information about their critical assets. They will be incorporated into the analysis. That information will be returned to them, and then we can decide how to collaborate further in terms of drawing down additional grant funds. And then, of course, the one that gets a lot of attention these days is the CDBG-DR process. I do want to thank our staff for the incredible progress that they've made in a very short time to date. This is what has been accomplished thus far. We have submitted our financial certification package to HUD. But the biggest thing that's done, of course, is we published the draft action plan. The board commenced a public comment period on that action plan. That's what we're doing right now. And Haggerty did help us with the unmet needs analysis stage of this, and that did incorporate information that was filed by the task force. As I mentioned, we are in the public comment period right now. Technically, that requires 2 public meetings. That's all that HUD needs, but our board asked us to really cover every corner of Lee County. And so staff has scheduled 10 public meetings. We are in the middle of that process now, and we are getting lots of good comments from residents. And then behind the scenes, we're putting together our implementation plan. We're procuring vendors that will help us. We're doing Tier 1 environmental reviews so that we can speed projects getting out of the ground as soon as HUD approves our action plan. And then this just shows all of the things that have yet to be done. And it is a 6-year life cycle for this program, so there's a lot of work still to come. In terms of the suggested allocations themselves, most of you have seen this before. These are the funding buckets, if you will, that are included in the draft action plan. I won't go through each of them, but we will, again, planning being the focus of this meeting, talk about that particular column. We have proposed $25 million in total for planning efforts, the vast majority of which would be available to the county, the municipalities, special districts, and the school district to propose resiliency and recover focused planning studies that they want to conduct. And these funds, that is an eligible activity with these funds, I should say. We've also built in some funds for a behavioral health system implementation plan. This would give us further direction to use these monies then to create a system of care that, I guess I would use the homeless continuum of care as sort of an analogous structure so that you can understand what this would mean in terms of coordinated entry for people who need those kinds of services. The CDBG-DR action plan is, of course, contained in the action plan itself. And finally, a specifically named project within the action plan is the long-term recovery task force. And so with that, I think that's a good jumping off point to, this gentleman doesn't need an introduction, but we will call the collaboratory CEO, Mike Martin, to the front here and ask him to kick off the task force presentation.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions for our staff before we jump into that? Yeah, Mr. Martin, if you could just pause for one moment. I think Commissioner Pendergrass has a question real quick. Microphone. There you go. He's gone.
Thank you. Glenn, thank you for the information. Obviously, we're hearing it, so I think we all just, obviously, we appreciate everybody's involvement, and we look forward to the final product and everything. I think a lot of this is, hopefully today we'll get a lot of answers. I think in my position, I think others I've said, we heard in the last meeting, we're just getting a lot of feedback from the community and people from the task force, where we at with everything. I know we're still the public input part of it, but everybody's considering it's almost a year now since the hurricane. Everybody's it's been a long time, but this is a long-term process is what I've been telling people in the community. This is a long-term, it takes years for those to cover. And just where we are today, and hopefully we can get some of those answers today. So you provided some great feedback. I think still it's the perception out of the community, like I saw a news story this week. I had a couple of calls on it, and I saw the story where, their Wink TV news story where it's saying the task force was going to be allocating the $1.2 billion for the CED, BGDR money, and that's not totally accurate though, correct? Because so that's being promoted out there publicly, and people think that. Then we have cities, municipalities, and different groups come back to me, and I'm not sure if the other board members too, saying, how do we get that money if the task force is doing it? And then you have task force members saying, well, we're told we're not involved with that. So can you give a little bit of background on that?
Yes, sir. So HUD does require the grantee, meaning you as the Board of County Commissioners, be the responsible entity for these funds. You do have to determine what the allocations will be, what the programs are, how people draw down that funding, and then, of course, the county is ultimately responsible for how those monies are spent. So at the end of the day, we have to oversee the entire program, we have to monitor for compliance, and if anything were to go awry, the county would be on the hook for those funds. So the responsibility really begins and ends with the BoCC in that regard. That said, of course, we're taking advisement from all of your committees and the task force being assigned specifically for hurricane recovery. We've used that input as best we can to prioritize.
But I understand that, as of this morning, we're getting questioned again about allocations of money. So I'm just making sure, and I talked to you about last week in briefings, we talked about it in other public meetings before, about making sure we follow the protocols and policies, make sure there's, at the end of the day, a year or 2 years from now, the money is being handled properly for the transparency, for the taxpayers' site. But then when I asked this question in the last meeting, so for example, like the current ask for the extra money, I guess I'm trying to get to, in the past I've asked before is how staff, or when I ask our management staff, where we at with different parts of this process, we don't know it because our staff's not involved. And so I think that's a big issue, is our staff's not really involved, so we can't get feedback from our own staff on this, where we are in the process.
So Commissioner, to answer that question, I think the best way to explain it is how county staff was involved was we are participants. We're participating in, or attendees in the process.
So you're in the audience, but you're not really involved though.
Well, with the original work session that was put together, or the workshops that the task force put together, they brought our staff in, they interviewed our staff. We worked collectively to pick the staff that would be appropriate for those interviews. They were interviewed, that information was then, and if I'm saying something wrong, let me know, but it was eventually doled out and brought into the branches. We are also presenters. We've presented through natural resources and we presented through CDBGR. We have also our attendees. We are not active participants on the branch meetings, but we are participants in those meetings. So we don't sit at the table as a branch member, but we are there. If we're asked a question, we can answer the question. We can also speak at the end of the meeting as well. So that's by the county in that process.
So if I ask you next week about a certain process, you're going to say we are involved and we know what's going on with the funding and where we are with the funding? Because in the past you said we weren't involved.
That was our involvement. We're not driving the direction of the discussion. We're not deriving direction of how the task force is moving forward with those topics. We were the initial conversation on the topics, but we're not driving those at this point.
Do you have a recommendation on how we could be more involved with the direction of the process? Since you said, you just used the term, we're not driving the process.
Well,
So we're not driving, who's driving the process, and how can we be more involved if we have to approve the final project on behalf of the Board of County Commissioners? And we have to answer that for the future.
Sure. I think who's driving it right now would be the task force. The task force that was appointed, it is moving forward, is driving the content, essentially, with our input at certain times. How to get staff involvement, it could be like any other program that the county does. We can go back to ARPA, CARES, CDBGDR, where staff is actually driving it and we can incorporate the task force and the branches into that, however the board sees fit. That's how you get staff input, is having the staff drive as opposed to having an outside entity drive.
Okay. I was just curious, because like I said, at the end of the day, we have to either approve, not approve, and we're responsible at the end of the day to HUD and all the different agencies that's providing this funding and the local taxpayers who's receiving or not receiving the benefits of this. So I want to make sure at the end of the day we're covered a year or two from now if we continue with the process that we're not really involved in. So that's why I was asking. Thank you.
Commissioner Remain, you're recognized.
Sure. So this is probably a little bit of a hybrid of staff involvement to some degree, staff's independent contractor that was selected by the BoCC, and no different than a liaison position, whether you're TDC or MPO. Where this is a little bit different is that there's a lot more staff engagement, because I didn't see in all the years of doing liaison positions that there was the engagement and or activity from the staff. So that's different. Liaisons, we as a Board of County Commissioners picked Haggerty to run Point. We picked, any of the people. This recovery is about trying to get input from the community on what they need and what they have to do to recover. So it's a little bit different, but it's a Category 5 that we're all trying to recover from. And it's their recovery. We just happen to be the government board, but I'm not aware of any decision that the task force has made or have any authority to make any decisions. We're just a body that basically listens, solicits, and then obviously will make the various presentation recommendations, and that's for the 5 of us to decide. If I missed anything, is that an accurate way of describing something that's a little bit unorthodox?
Yes, I think the only thing I was saying in this is that in this case, typically, I shouldn't say typically, what we've done in the past on certain projects is that would be driven by staff. In this case, it's not. So the content isn't being driven by staff is the only difference in this.
But the RTF is really a composite of all the people in the community. I mean,
Correct.
branches have 120 to 150 people from the community that have a vested interest financially, emotionally, and mentally in the community. And all we're doing is soliciting their input. No branch, no task force has made any decision. Is that an accurate statement?
I would say, yes. We're not involved. I'm not in the meeting, so I can't verify that. But yes, I don't believe any decisions have come before the board for discussion. That's correct.
Just trying to get the people's engagement, try to find out how do we do that. And most of the processes we go through require community engagement, whether it's block grant or any other. It's really the recovery that we represent the community and trying to help them recover. I don't see this as, to me, this was, we had X billions of dollars damage, and how do we recover, and how do we work as a team to advocate for that recovery, for that funding, whether it's Tallahassee or the federal government, and what better to have people from the community give us some type of input and or some type of direction, especially as some of them are not only mentally engaged, emotionally engaged, but financially have businesses that have been devastated by this. So I think this is a little bit unique, but this concept was put together 8 or 9 months ago. And again, I'm not certain here's the 10 things we should do. We've compiled information and tried to come up with best recommendations, but I think we're still going to make those decisions. It is just a little bit more complicated than a situation, but it's not any governing body that has any authority.
One thing that I heard you say that I think was what I envisioned the task force to be originally too when I thought about it and supported it and still support it to this day, was that it sounds like it's a group of citizens who have assembled to provide input on the hurricane recovery, which is exactly what we need, right? Because this is a community recovery, so that makes a lot of sense. I have gotten a lot of questions about what is the purpose of the group and what is the ultimate work product or the ultimate deliverable at the end of the day, and I'm hoping that today we will answer that through our update and through our conversation. So one thing that did get answered for me just in the beginning of the presentation here is I see that the CDBG-DR action plan is on a separate line from the Long-Term Recovery Task Force. So that seems to answer one question for me. The Long-Term Recovery Task Force is not the decision-making body on the CDBG-DR action plan. However, they are a body to provide us advice from the citizens and comment from the citizens, which is what we're seeking right now.
And to your point, Mr. Chairman, I'm glad that's up there because that was always my understanding from the get-go.
Okay, great. So I think that's good. What other questions do you have at this time before we ask Mr. Martin to share his presentation? Okay, all right. Mr. Martin, you're welcome to proceed.
Thank you very much. I'm here, I'll be very brief. And as I've said many times, and many of you know this already, I am a proud graduate of the Tom Sawyer School of Management. I get other people to paint the fence, and I'm going to turn it over to the fence painters in just a moment. But I just want to make a few observations from a couple of different perspectives I've been involved in. I think, as you know, I was involved through 2 hurricanes and a pandemic at one of the larger institutions in this community and watched the community rally in each of those instances on behalf of all the citizens, and I congratulate the commission and the staff for appreciating that. I was a very early member of one of the branches and remain involved in that, so I've had the chance to see it from that perspective. And now in the last several weeks, it really has been, I've had a chance from the inside to observe the Haggerty collaboratory team in carrying out the responsibilities dedicated to them. And I just want to argue, first of all, that I think it's a really remarkable process. I think all of these are always a bit of sausage making, but I think it has been valuable to this community to go through this process because the 120 plus people that I've come to observe through the branches have really done a couple of things. One is they've really invested themselves and their time in serving the community in partnership with the commission and the staff. I think they've sent a message to the larger population that leaders in this community who've invested their time and their energy and their passion here and are now engaged in this process believe that the leadership within this commission and its staff will really achieve the objectives and the best interests of the folks that they interact with every day. And I think that sends a really powerful message. For me, one of the things I found interesting is as we've gone through the process in the branches, how closely many of the conversations align with the strategic plan that you had for the county before the hurricane hit. So it demonstrates, at least to me, that there was some very good thinking going on even before we had to recover from one of the most devastating natural events in this community for many, many, many decades, I believe. So in that sense, I think along with having in the process of actually putting an action plan on the ground, I believe the process has been very valuable to the community to demonstrate that leadership listens, that leadership is capable of not only listening but synthesizing outcomes, and in the process really serving not just to recover from this hurricane, though we all understand how significant that will continue to be, but to really, I think as one of your documents said, invest, imagine, and build, that it's also a chance to imagine some more. And that, I think, is incredibly valuable in terms of just the psychological well-being as well as the long-term well-being of the community. I think some of you know that my principal interest prior to moving across the street over here was in the education and workforce branch. And I have believed for many years in my time here that there are some critical needs that need to be faced around workforce that were exacerbated by the hurricane, but were there to begin with. As you probably know, and I know you know this, we have one of the lowest workforce participation rates, not just in Florida, but in the nation. And that's not getting any better. And we have some pretty big gaps in that in serving this community in the future. And so for me, that was one of the inspirations for coming together and saying, let's begin, as you know, of the 4 objectives, right, to inventory our needs, and then use the branches to seek partnerships, and carry on then the next 2 objectives of the resilient lease. So I just want to note, from a citizen standpoint, from a member of the community that was involved with one of the larger institutions, and now having a chance to see the team in action, I'm impressed that this has been a thoughtful approach, and that in the end the right outcomes will occur, and that we will be compliant with all funders for sure, but more importantly, we'll be compliant with the wishes and the aspirations and the frustrations of the people we all care about. And to me, that's what great leadership is about. It's not just about getting up and transacting, it's about transforming. And I think this is the moment of transformation, as painful as it may be, that will fundamentally change this community for decades to come. And for that, everybody ought to take a certain time to self-congratulate. I'll congratulate myself later tonight. I'll probably buy myself a glass of wine. But I'll buy you one too if I bump into any of you. But the bottom line is, I believe the process is going forward rather nicely. And there'll always be some bumps in the road. I certainly appreciate that. But I think the road is well mapped out. And in the long run, we will be able to look back and say that in this moment in time, this community did, through a whole variety of means, the right things. And that, to me, is an outcome worth continuing to pursue. So with that, let me turn this over to the leader of the Haggerty team. And Tanya, you ready? So Tanya Shannon will pick this up and go as Tom Sawyer gets out of the way. And we'll hopefully have a chance over time to continue the dialogue. But just want to say again, this has been a remarkably interesting process, and if it continues as it is, it will be a remarkable, impactful process. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr.
Tanya, go get them.
Not sure how much fence painting I'm going to be doing right now, but all right. So as Dr. Martin started with kind of the vision of the Resiliently Recovery Task Force as we understood it and are helping to facilitate, but really is the Recovery Task Force, the 120 plus branch members that are really driving the content, the direction of the conversation. But the goal is to identify recovery in December to identify those priorities so that regardless of which funding stream, I believe Commissioner Wayne, you coined at one of the town halls, the CDBG-DR action plan, that's the $1.1 billion plan. The Resiliently Recovery Task Force plan is going to be a $10 billion plus plan. The needs of the community are going to greatly exceed what CDBG-DR is able to do, as been vocalized in the town halls and the 5,000 plus respondents to the surveys that have gone out through the website, through the plethora of community input that has gone through this entire process, that the needs are going to greatly exceed that $1.1 billion. So what are those priorities? What are specific initiatives that will help achieve the goals that the community is looking for? And to provide some recommendations that at that point, when it's presented in December, we'll take additional study, contemplation, and work from a wide variety of individuals to bring them to reality, and also continue to learn and adjust through the recovery process. So what we're hoping with this is to gain your input. Are we on the right track? We are in August. We started in February, and we have until December, but a lot of work is still ongoing. The branch members are spending countless hours in reviewing, providing input, providing direction. We are going to be doing another round of community engagement in mid-September to gain that input of did we go on the right track as the community had expressed to us. So seeking that as well from you all today of are we on the right track? Are any edits needed? Any other stakeholders that need to be incorporated? Are there other ways that folks can be incorporated throughout the process? So largely this process is having 3 phases. The first phase was kicked off in February. March, April, and May, we were listening. That's where the 17 town halls occurred, where over 1,000 people participated. We had over 5,000 responses to the survey that was on the website for Resilient Lee. We started kicking off the branch meetings and listening from the community stakeholders, as well as the Recovery Task Force, of what the priorities were of the community to incorporate it in their plan. Within the June, July, August, September timeframe, we're working on solutions of, all right, here's a problem that's identified, mental health, and it's use emergency management terminology, blue sky and a gray sky issue. It's an issue that without the hurricane was already a problem, but was further exacerbated in terms of access to mental health services for the general public as well as first responders. So this was communicated as a significant issue. What are potential solutions? Bringing those players together, of identifying them. We're not working with a specific funding stream in mind. We're looking at overall what is the need and then piecemealing the funding streams together to make a recommendation on how it can become a reality. Throughout August and September, work through that through multiple means, recovery task force meetings, one-on-one meetings with each municipality, each branch recovery task force member, with the county, and going through them and saying, what isn't feasible? We want to make sure that they're feasible, viable solutions that are being identified that are actually actionable, and not just a plan that ends up on the shelf. And then with an October, November, and December timeframe, looking at how can this, or working through the process of approvals, making sure we've incorporated everyone's feedback, and then presenting in December 5th to you all. What the process is when this effort was initiated, just as a standard practice, anytime we start and kind of work, we developed a project management plan that was presented to Roger at the time, the chairman of the task force, Commissioner Wayne, as well as the RTF, and saying, based on our experience in doing disaster recovery work, and this is my 120, this is what we are seeing as a best practice and what we're seeing in knowing Lee County, and having worked with you for quite some time. So presented that, received feedback, incorporated it as our guiding light through this process. We are abiding by sunshine laws. All meetings are public meetings. We work very closely with county staff, making sure everything is publicly noticed appropriately. Spent a lot of time with the county attorney's office in the beginning and making sure that we are following all the rules and doing maintaining all the necessary documentation to be abiding by sunshine laws. As a guiding principle for us, we understand, and how it's been communicated within the Recovery Task Force and within the branches, is this is an advisory committee. All things within the plan are going to be identified as recommendations. There are going to be recommendations that are very specific. There are going to be some that are more focused on, these are general areas to look at, but are not within the scope of what can be accomplished during the Resilient Lee planning effort. So everything is going to be outlined as a recommendation. There will be a needed work after December 5th to be able to take that and run with it and decide at each municipality within the county, the school board, the Lee Health, of which pieces they're going to really continue to run with and adopt if they decide to adopt those recommendations. Major players are the Recovery Task Force members, which we'll go over who specifically they are in a little bit. They're providing the oversight of all the work that the branch members are developing. We are going to be meeting twice a month going forward and going initiative by initiative. We have completed the majority of the one-on-ones where the team has met with each Recovery Task Force member and outlined this is the feedback that is needed. We need you to review each and every initiative to make sure that we're factoring in all the information, that the branches have any feedback that they would like a different direction, and then we'll be continuing that iterative process through the next several months until we're able to fine-tune each of these initiatives. Branch members are doing a lot of the legwork. They are reviewing and developing each initiative, providing feedback. They are asking questions and asking for SMEs, which we then are reaching out to municipalities, to county staff, and saying, do you have some information on this that can help the branch members identify what is the best path forward on the initiative? or if there's a SME outside of the Lee County area, reaching back to within Haggerty and staff or collaboratory staff, or reaching out to other municipalities. We'll talk about the workshops and SMEs from Miami-Dade. We had SMEs from other jurisdictions that provided information on best practices done elsewhere. And then the recovery support team, it consists of Haggerty collaboratory staff, and then us reaching out and very appreciative to all the county and municipal staff that have provided support and information throughout this process. Could not have done this without them, and they already have so much on their plate. It is a catastrophic event that you've gone through. They're already with all the work that was already on their plate prior to the hurricane, on top of doing all the damage assessments, doing all the debris operations, doing all the permitting work. They have been very gracious with their time in being able to provide information that we can feed back to the branch members in terms of best practices, or what has worked and what hasn't worked in the past.
Real quick, could you go back to that slide? So I've got a couple questions then in the process. So under branch members, we're talking about immediate short-term and long-term needs of the county. Are we talking about needs that were just caused due to the damage from Hurricane Ian, or are we talking about overall county issues?
So with the plan, it is a recovery plan with a resiliency aspect. So there were problems that existed prior, or there were issues that were further exacerbated by Hurricane Ian that are also being looked at by the branch members. The branch members or the task force members kind of identified, hey, this would have been very beneficial for us to have. It would have made response if we had done this. So it's looking at both largely what are the damages or what are the issues that Ian caused or brought to light. Then here are some other things that can make us more resilient in the future if something else very, very long from now were to occur. What would make the county more resilient going forward if you were all to face even a worse disaster or a different disaster than the one that Ian prevented?
Okay, and then I had one more question under bullet point 3. We're going to conduct analysis and research at the direction of the Recovery Task Force Chairman, the Recovery Task Force itself, and the branches. But at any point, could you conduct analysis and research also at the request of some of our staff at the county who have issues that they'd like to see looked into? I mean, a lot of times the folks who work in the individual departments at the counties identify things on a daily basis that they bring to us to, with recommendations to vote on as far as policy matters, and I kind of think that there's something missing there.
We can definitely do that. Actually, through a lot of our conversations, there have been some additional issues that were identified by staff, and also solutions that staff had, like, hey, it would be really great if we did this, that we then brought back to the branches. But completely hearing what you're saying, we can incorporate any other areas that county staff or you all would like to have research and provide information based off of what the branches are seeing, what is done elsewhere in the country in terms of recoveries, and also see if that overlaps with an area within the recovery and resiliency plan.
And I'm going to get to Commissioner Pendergrass, but my thought was just here we have departments that are working these problems every single day. They probably know them better than anybody else and would be invaluable resources that could add to the conversation. Commissioner Pendergrass?
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Chairman, if I could. So kind of lead off what Commissioner Hammond was saying, our Chairman. That was some of the questions I was asking early on, and because we have, for example, transportation owners came up with some of the meetings that I attended, and for example, like Commissioner Hammond said, we have our DOT, and we have a 5-year, 10-year transportation plan we're looking at, and that's what I was concerned about when I was talking to staff before, is what if elements come back to this final plan on December 5th that relates to transportation that we've not worked on. We currently had a plan in place before this occurred that also incorporates the cities that may not, and we have an MPO that oversees the transportation too. That's my concern as a staff, and that's why I was asking questions like our staff not being involved, and then now behavioral health came up in it, and clinics and mobile health care clinics, which you probably don't know because you're not from here, but last year we fund one of the biggest shortfalls in the state of Florida in Lee County is behavioral health. And in the past, I know you're not from this area, but we funded some extra. We're trying to constantly catch up with that. There's never enough. But that's also a long-term continuing funding issue. Mm-hmm. And it's also back to a policy issue. The Board of County Commissioners would be involved, or the Lee Health or the different agency we would work with is involved with that because we're not really over healthcare. So that's why my questions have been where this money is going to go and how is it going to really get back to the community. And if without our staff being involved, how much more is it costing us taxpayer dollars back to facilitate this that we already are doing? It's kind of duplication, triplication of government. And that was my concern. And also, like I said, the transportation, there's some elements over the years, 11 years, there's some different things come up through the years, the different transit authorities and stuff has come up and gone back and forth. So how is that transportation going to affect the future of Lee County and our future CIP, the budget?
Actually, that was one of the main concerns of the RTF in the last meeting in July, as we were reviewing the 3 initiatives that we got, or I think we went through 4 or 5 of them in the last RTF meeting. The mobile clinics and the resiliency hubs, the direction that we received from the RTF was to phase it. That if phase 1 focusing on disaster times, as those funding streams are a lot clearer, as a large number of the services that are being rendered within those 2 are eligible or should be eligible under FEMA public assistance. And then for phase 2 in identifying what are those funding streams that can do the blue skies and elements there, in which we are incorporating recommendations of how they can be funded, but the initiatives are intended to be phased of here's where we clearly see the funding of where it could be if implemented, and then here are additional phases, and these are additional questions that need to be resolved over the process, but completely, that was a large portion of the conversation in July.
Okay. Commissioner Ruane?
Sure, thank you. And I agree with both and Commissioner Pendergrass. I think what's maybe lost is in identifying the recovery priorities. When Roger was here, Chris and certainly Dave used to sit down and go over specific hurricane-related items. We'd identify buildings. We'd identify all the different infrastructure issues we had. So it wasn't the task force not including what was done by staff, because staff was very, very engaged in, again, identifying the recovery, priorities. I mean, we basically, from a recovery point of view, here's the property, here's the things that are wrong, here are the things that need to be corrected, whether it's transportation, whether it's buildings, whether it's parks. There were constant meetings. At some point in time, there was weekly meetings with those things, and I know they were always incorporated. So I think the best word that I've heard in this whole presentation is recovery priorities and what actions and what needs do we have. But I believe, based on my meetings, there were a lot of input from staff on things that we had issues with. FEMA didn't do this, FEMA didn't inspect that, we need to fix that, we need to fix this. So I wouldn't say it was not without any input from staff. But
All right, I'll turn over to Tessa for the next section.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Good to see you. My name is Tessa Lesage. I work at Collaboratory, and we are happy to be supporting the Haggerty team in the work of developing the recovery and resiliency plan for Lee County. My goal today is to really illustrate how this effort has really been a partnership between the county, the Recovery Task Force, the branches, and the community. So let's get started. You've already sort of heard a little bit about these phases, and I don't want to be repetitive. Review of the process, and here is more detail on the journey that we've been on. We're currently in phase 2. Phase 1 was recognizing key challenges and identifying priorities, and phase 2 is really this portion of building out the resilience plan based on the initiatives that have been slowly being funneled down by the branches as we have received so much information and input from the community and a variety of stakeholders. And then, of course, phase 3 will actually be the finalization of the plan. So in addition to Commissioner Ruane, these are the remaining 12 members that make up the Recovery Task Force. And these are the 8 branches. They're designed based on the FEMA framework to help to the development of this plan. And this has really been under the leadership of these community leaders. These folks everyone on the branches have spent countless hours working together to share their expertise and ideas and thoughts. But these are the folks that have actually stepped up and gone so far as to lead these branches and to make sure that we stay on track with the goal of moving forward. You've already heard, but there are over 120 community members that are on these branches, including their alternates. So since March, we've had more than 40 meetings, and we estimate that this is between 8,000 and 10,000 hours of community work that branch members have provided. And the branch members were all approved by the Board of County Commissioners and recommended by the Recovery Task Force members. Over time, the goal has really been to funnel the input from the branches and from the community and from the RTF into what will eventually become a plan of priorities for recovery and resilience for Lee County going forward. We started with 221 sub-priorities, and we have narrowed that down to 32 across the branches. In addition to the input and work that's been provided by the branches, we have had a website with a survey available to the community to also be able to provide input. We've received more than 5,000 responses, and this has further illuminated what the priorities are from the community. And you can see the list here: housing and homelessness, economic development, environmental issues, crime, violence, public safety, and parks and recreational areas have risen to the top of the list. We also conducted 17 town halls, and this engagement met some of the HUD requirements, as you've heard today, for the CDBG-DR community engagement requirements for the action plan. So this is where the Recovery Task Force work and the work of developing the resilient is actually supporting the other work that's going on for that $1.1 billion. We had 15 in-person and 2 virtual town halls. We exceeded over 1,000 people participating, and we really had some great input from across the county, making sure that we went to all of the planning communities. So input from these town halls was brought back to further the next steps. From there, we established the opportunity to use workshops using subject matter experts to address the things that the branches needed more information on. And this was a great place for county staff to participate and provide us information about the things not only that they're already doing, but that are in plans, future plans, as well as things that they think are potential solutions that they've been researching or found that could be beneficial to move things forward, given the current emergent state that things are in. So the workshops took place over several days, including a separate workshop for the public, for the electric utilities, because we know how important that is to the development of the plan. The themes are supporting business and workforce. A lot of these branches have overlapping needs and ideas, and so we put the workshops into themes. So supporting business and workforce, community resilience, critical infrastructure, and of course, attainable and resilient housing. And as you can see, we completed 14 workshops with 72 panelists, 14 national experts, 32 county and city employees combined, and 26 other community stakeholders that provided subject matter expertise. Because as we've sort of been hearing here today, a lot of the things that are being prioritized in this plan don't fall solely on the Board of County Commissioners staff. There are things also that are part of, the health system, the education and workforce system, so it really is a collaborative plan. So again, we continue to pull information from the community and offer opportunities for people to be engaged, specifically with regard to the initiatives, taking all that information from the survey, from the town halls, from the workshops, and allowing the branch and RTF members to submit initiatives. What are the things that we could do moving forward that could help us start to achieve the priorities that were established by the Recovery Task Force? And we had over 300 projects submitted, and those have been narrowed down now to about 85 initiatives. So, This is another example of how the Recovery and Resilience Plan development process has helped to meet the requirements for the HUD action plan. While these two things are separate, we are fulfilling some of that work and the work that we're doing as part of the Recovery and Resilience Plan. Of the 148 infrastructure projects submitted by the Recovery Task Force, 75 projects totaling about $1.8 billion were included in the unmet needs analysis. So this is now, we're entering into phase, that's where we've been, and now here we are with where we are currently in phase 2. We did go ahead and prepare about 10 technical briefs. The lists of the topics for those are here in the blue portion of the slide. And these technical briefs were really to provide additional information to the branch members for expertise that they may not have or that they needed more information on even after the workshops and otherwise. I think there's a clear direction and intent from the branch members to make sure that we are recommending things that are feasible, that are desirable, and that are actually something that we can implement. This is basically what we've talked about in one slide. Okay, so this is the way all of that information is being funneled into the development of the branch's initiatives that are going to become part of the branch action plan that will eventually be taken to that will eventually become part of the Resiliently Recovery and Resilience Plan. And I think that this is a nice overview because we are taking information from a lot of places, right? So it is a partnership. It's not one entity feeding the information. There's lots of information being provided. This gives you an idea of what an initiative will look like. What you can see here is it's sort of like a playbook. These are recommendations with information that can be easily implemented. We're trying to make it as easy to move forward with something as possible. The leadership, there's a section of the initiative that says who would be the lead. And the leadership is really something that can be shared across public, private, and nonprofit partners. It doesn't have to just be county staff. So this is really a comprehensive plan for the community and a set of priorities for how we can recover and become more resilient. Also, it includes existing policies and plans that need to be considered in the work going forward as we implement, and it identifies potential funding sources. So we know that other funding sources are available and can become available. The idea is that we want to have priorities together so that we're not all asking for the same thing or we're not all asking for different things and diminishing our ability to achieve what we want as a community as a whole. So, with regard to phase 2, this is where we are now. We are in the middle, we've almost a series of one-on-one meetings with Recovery Task Force members and their staff. And we've gathered information about whether these are headed in the right direction, what might we have missed, do they have additional feedback, and what we're realizing is that this idea of having a set of priorities, even if each priority doesn't directly benefit each entity, is gaining shared cross-jurisdictional support. This idea of having priorities that we can all work on together is of value. And State Representative Jenna Persons-Malika, she noted that the plan would be really useful in helping inform requests for next year's legislative session. So next up, we will be moving forward with the RTF to continue to review and provide feedback on initiatives. The branches are meeting this week, and they are reviewing initiatives and providing feedback that we will continue to use to hone those initiatives and bring them to the RTF for consideration. This initiative, I believe you have as an example in front of you, the mobile health clinics. This gives you an idea of some of the things that they're talking about, that they think are not only a good solution for the period during a disaster, but also, on blue sky days. We know that folks have trouble with accessibility in receiving health care, and mobile health clinics can provide additional support in the community. The Planning and Capacity Branch is taking all of the initiatives from the other branches and creating a series of maps or an overlay to show where things make the most sense. There is no one-size-fits-all decision or recommendation for the entire county. The county looks different in its different areas. There are different needs. There are different risks. And so really this idea of the overlay is to visualize how the initiatives play and work together. And so some of the things that we're considering are traffic congestion, where the workforce lives, how do we make sure that we're appealing to younger generations, especially when we're talking about the workforce needs that Dr. Martin mentioned, and then how do we make sure our housing is resilient. So the overlay is really going to be providing information for all of the governing bodies to be able to make decisions based on the recommendations that are in the plan. And that is the end of my portion. I'll turn it over to Tanya now.
So Tessa mentioned 2 of the 85 and evolving initiatives just now. One of the initiatives also, but one that has been under discussion since the beginning, are the neighborhood plans to the board at the August 1st board meeting. So neighborhood plans are a best practice within recovery planning and looking at specific pockets of target areas. I believe I spoke with one of you guys recently. Recovery is a marathon. It is a very long process. I personally live in Panama City. We're 5 years after Hurricane Michael. There's been significant strides, but there's still areas that it looks like the storm hit last month. So looking at what are some targeted areas that can be focused on to do very specific work, project-specific work, and to revitalize that specific area. So neighborhood plans, we're looking at what we discussed with the Recovery Task Force in the beginning back in February, are what are some specific areas, 8 blocks. That was some of them grew a little bit, but the goal is to look at an 8-block area or something around those areas of where could a impact be made, a focus, where would be a once-in-a-generational level change in the community. Looking at, it could be they were catastrophically impacted by Hurricane Ian, such as Times Squares in Fort Myers Beach, or across the bridge in San Carlos Island. Or it could be an area where there's an economic opportunity that if there is significant change, it could be a boost for the community. Fort Myers put forward Midtown. Cape Coral put forward a couple neighborhoods as well that go into both buckets. So the neighborhood plans are project-based plans of what are some targeted activities that can be done, not changing policy or anything along those lines, but what are some projects that can be done to improve a 8-block area to make that once-in-a-generation level change due to this significant amount of money coming to the area post Hurricane Ian that we can do for the community at large.
So how did you come up with the 13 communities that you came up with?
That is a great question. Let's jump to slide 41. So the process that we came through is we introduced the concept back in February. The RTF members and the branch members then came up with a longer list than what currently we have on the screen. So we took that input. We were then looking at what are ways to identify how to target them, potentially reducing that longer list. We met with each individual municipality and the county and make sure it was not duplicating efforts. That if there was an existing effort for one of the neighborhoods on the list, that we didn't want to get in the way or that we didn't want to duplicate those efforts. So the list used to be longer, and it has come to this, not as short as I originally thought, but a shorter list of neighborhoods to focus on for it. We did contemplate a couple other ways of reducing the size of the list. However, the RTF, the Recovery Task Force, communicated that we do not want to reduce this. We want to put forward this as our recommendation of these being the neighborhoods that are targeted. So it's been RTF put forward, branch put forward, met with each municipality and the county to discuss, and this is the neighborhoods that are.
So who put forward the areas for the county?
It's mixed. So, for example, Chief DeLallo put forward Lehigh Acres. He's a Recovery Task Force member. Harlem Heights, we actually had a very strong contingent of public input from the Harlem Heights community. So that one came from that came from straight from the town halls. That one needed to be a focus. Matt Lachey has been one that has been on the discussion point since the beginning. San Carlos Island was one within the county and kind of discussing that one. And being mostly, and kind of came up in our Fort Myers Beach conversation of how to recreate that connective tissue with Times Square and Old San Carlos and parking and having that connective tissue between the two areas. So each one came from a different source.
Okay. You know, I guess that was my question. I wanted to know what the county input was and who got to speak for the unincorporated parts of the county, since you mentioned the municipalities got to put forward folks. I will say this, just sticking up for my district, North Fort Myers was inundated by storm surge in several areas. You know, certainly Business 41 area of North Fort Myers is a blighted area pre-storm. I know we're not trying to be redundant, but there are other things in this effort that do seem like they're duplicative of trying to rectify problems that existed pre-storm. And I don't see North Fort Myers anywhere on that list. That was one thing that really stuck out to me. I believe Commissioner Pendergrass was first and then Commissioner Ruane. I'll give you both a chance to.
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up, Brian, because of those 13 areas, only 4 is unincorporated. The other 9 would be within the municipalities, who would be go to Glenn, I guess, or Dave. The municipalities would be the one applying for the CDBGDR money, right, for any type of plans, right? The cities would be doing that, not the county. It's an area, it's a project within their boundaries. If there's money coming from the city of that area would be the ones, for those 9 areas, the cities would be applying for that money, not the county, correct?
Well, we do have, we have recommended an allocation of $21.5 million for those kinds of planning efforts that the county, the municipalities, or special districts could propose.
Okay, just want to make sure, because like you were saying, you can't cover the whole county, obviously, because you have to, but when you talk about certain areas, you said you wouldn't be a policy decision. So, for example, Lehigh, you picked out 8 blocks in Lehigh. I'm not sure who you said earlier, I couldn't hear the name, but I talked to leadership in Lehigh the last few months. They've heard about this, they have not aware of it, and their question is how are you going to work with the property owners, own the property, one, if it's not a policy change, if it's transportation, based upon the pictures, I mean, streetscapes, you move the sidewalks, your right-of-way, you would be working with the county. There would be some policy decisions there as far as right-of-way, transportation, using funds for pedestrian biking. So there is some policy questions there, land use changes and stuff. That's when you say that, it's a little bit broader than that. You can't just take an area and say we're going to go in now and change this. And I had talked to the county attorney about that also, about how this would actually be incorporated. Of those 13 areas, only 4 is within the county, the other 9 within the cities. And I know the cities are involved, and I'm glad they're involved, sitting at the table and getting some incentives out of this. But it's the same from the county perspective. Like Commissioner Hammond said, there's some areas that's not touched. When you talk about Iona, for example, we heard that from some other community people.
We can definitely change the list of it. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. I was going to hear from Commissioner Ruane and then, or do you want to?
I agree with the points that were made. I wasn't at the last Recovery Task Force, and this morning I asked to defer the neighborhood plan because, quite frankly, I'm at a loss on how it was all put together. But we did initially, back in yesteryear, there was an email that I wrote to Matt Caldwell because initially during the storm, he was able to determine based on parcels, the damage we had throughout the county. So he came up with an overall list, and he had like 9 different neighborhoods that was kind of broken down. That I submitted, but I have not, that's why today at the meeting, I said, can we defer it? I wasn't at the last RTF meeting. I don't understand the ingredients of this. So, again, same questions you both have.
Thanks, Commissioner. Okay. Back to any other Commissioner questions at this time? No? Okay, yeah. Go ahead then.
Okay, so just kind of to speak to Commissioner Pendergrass's, an example of one of the neighborhood plans that we did was for the downtown Panama City area, and looking at taking it from a sleepy, about to kind of dying out area and turning it into the town halls that occurred for them post-Michael was wanting a placemaking, a economic center of an area that the community can rally around. So through that neighborhood planning effort, the focus was on traffic flow and increasing parking. There was the desire to improve the farmers market, an area that became a private partnership to do that, as well as building out the marina. A hotel has since been put in place, and several new restaurants, and again, public-private partnerships in that area. So with that, largely looking at existing infrastructure or what are ways that the private sector can be incorporated in them, and being very project-specific. So this was an example of what we were doing. But to Commissioner Ruane's point, the larger list, we did incorporate Matt Caldwell's list of neighborhoods and areas, and that was part of the larger one that, after the meetings with all the different jurisdictions, was the one that was how it kind of reduced to the list that we have here. But if there is a different direction that we should take in terms of this, one initiative of the 85, we can definitely take a different direction.
Chairman, if I could, just for clarity, when I questioned this before is because something I feel strongly about is home rule. If the city of Cape Coral, the city of Benita Springs, or Estero wants to do a project, I appreciate and I support their home rule. I'm not going to intervene. We, the county, have not historically ever paid or involved with the design of a project within the municipalities that I've been here. And I don't see us doing that in the future. That's why when I said this plan comes back to us on December 5th, it has part of the plan that's being created that we have to accept and not accept. If it has plans like that, it'd be hard pressed to ask us to support a project within the municipalities that we're not A, going to fund, or B, having the authority over the zoning requirements, policy decisions of that project. That's why I'm not sure why that is even involved with it. Other than money's out there, everybody wants to grab the money, I get that. But, and I want the cities to do that, but I want to do it within the home rule and let the cities do what they want. If Fred from Benita Springs wants to do this and the Mayor Gutner and Cape Coral wants it, I support them 110%. But I'm going to let them support their home rule too.
All right, so just with the examples of the areas that were discussed for each, just an example of the areas that the municipalities and different stakeholders have articulated that they'd like to be focused within the neighborhood plans. All right, so we have the 85 initiatives, or that number may change over time as we go through the adjudication process with the Recovery Task Force. And then in mid-September, we're intending to go back out for 2 more town halls and being largely engaging the community effort of providing input, or them providing input, us documenting that input, and then presenting that back to the branches and to the Recovery Task Force. So it will be 2 in person, 1 virtual, and then we're utilizing a lot of the feedback that we received in the 17 town halls was that they utilize these specific apps of being able to provide community input. So we're using that input to guide the virtual campaign of people being able to review the initiatives and provide that feedback to the Recovery Task Force and the branches.
Can we digress for a second? Just to digress for a second, I think there was great points that both Commissioner Pendergrass and Hammond made. Glenn, can you just reiterate again, part of this CDBGR planning money for $25 million does include municipality planning? They do have the opportunity to have some of that money appropriated, so we wouldn't be paying for something. We just would be appropriating planning money that was required under CDBGR?
Commissioner, so the way it's structured in the proposal is the county would issue a notice of funding availability, and the municipalities would essentially apply for those funds. They'd make their proposal to say, this is the study we want to undertake, and the board would, be the grantor then.
So the concept of this is identifying a priority, and then the municipality coming to the county to say, we'd like to plan this, and they could put an application in, and we would fund that based on the federal dollars we received.
Yes, sir.
From CBGR. It wouldn't be any county money or anything from our budget.
Absolutely correct.
Okay, I just thought I heard that earlier, and that was kind of passed by. Thank you, appreciate it.
just to kind of the two different approaches of options. So in going through the NOFO process, the notice of funding opportunity would be something that would be, and Glenn, completely correct me if I'm incorrect, that would be issued in post-January or once the action plan is accepted by HUD. One of the reasons why they were seeking to do the neighborhood plan sooner was that, so if the projects are identified through that process that could be CDBGDR eligible under infrastructure or housing, that those projects could be fleshed out once the NOFOs are out for infrastructure grants, are out for housing grants. So that was just one of the kind of impetuses for starting the initiative a little earlier and doing that planning effort now versus waiting until the HUD action plan is ratified by HUD. So that was just in the terms of the two options that are on the plate. So in terms of finalizing the plan, over the course of the next several months of meeting with the Recovery Task Force, meeting with the branches, finalizing the initiatives, and then putting everything together into the Recovery and Resilience Plan that will be presented as the report to the board as a list of recommendations from the Recovery Task Force. The structure of the plan will include these steps as outlined within the slide and incorporating all the additional community input that will be occurring in September. After December 5th, this is currently what is in discussion within the Recovery Task Force of what does this look like post-December. Is less frequent but potentially quarterly Recovery Task Force meetings needed to kind of measure the progress. As municipal and county Lee Health staff are reviewing the initiatives and identifying which recommendations they're moving forward, how is that tracked? So that is currently under discussion within the Recovery Task Force and would be presented within that plan that is presented in December. We are working on the final dates for some of the second meetings within October and November. However, resilientlead.org is being maintained. Welcome all of you all to the Recovery Task Force meetings, and that is it. Any questions?
Any questions, Commissioner Sandelli?
I've got a few things to think about, but I'll wait and turn.
Okay.
Any questions?
Anybody else have anything? Commissioner Greenwell? Go ahead and hit your microphone so it's, yeah, turn it green. Mike, just your microphone, there you go.
One of the things that kind of pops out to me that concerns me a little bit, and I know when we first started the task force that, the goals were to have the community assist us in, finding out how we could make it better, what we could do next time better, how we could be stronger, have resiliency and things like that. So no question, we've had great support from the community and everybody's really jumped on board, and it's great to hear. But one of my concerns is, and I just want to throw it out there, is that, if we're doing planning in areas throughout the county, I think it would be tremendously important that staff would not only just have a seat, county staff should be involved in that planning. We've been doing that for obviously a long time, and that's the link that's bothering me a little bit, is I just want to make sure that we don't just, the staff doesn't just have a seat. When they bring something to the 5 county commissioners to vote on, we want to make sure that it's something that staff's kind of looked at it and believes in it as well. So I just don't want us to get caught up in not having that seat at the table. So that's one of my concerns, and I want to make sure I got it out there. Thank you.
Commissioner Sandelli.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's interesting. I sat here and listened because my parents always told me, listen well, have empathy for who's across the table, then communicate well in that order. It's not ready, fire, aim. So I've been listening. First of all, I want to thank Kevin, and I want to thank everybody that's been involved in this task force for your time, your talents, and your dedication. We sat there after that storm, and it was kind of a question of where we go from here. So thank you to everybody, and Kevin in particular, for taking that burden on. It was interesting watching the news this weekend and watching what's happening in Maui. And boy, it just came back like that. I'm sitting in the kitchen with stuff all over the place and thinking, what did we learn and what can we share with that? This won't be our last hurricane, and so we'll hope we're better prepared. I think sequentially, and I think that goes back to part of my past. And so one is I wanted to thank the staff, again, for their after-action report. This took me back, not to the storm, but prior to the storm, what we were looking at, what we were trying to decide to do. And so it was a great review that way. Of course, my wife is going crazy because I got stuff all over the kitchen. I go, this works, And then we got the piece from Glenn, and then this presentation today. I think it all fits into the sequential thing. They're not individual pieces that we try to tag together. So how do you take the best out of each of these and how do you integrate them? I didn't know the government could work this well when the governor tapped me on the shoulder. We're not perfect, but boy, we sure work hard. And when I say we, not only the county, but all of you as my neighbors and constituents and so on and so forth. I do think that we have all the pieces here. To steal an old phrase, I think we need to rearrange the deck chairs a little bit. And I think that what that means to me is we are the county commission and we have to respond to the information that's given to us. Ultimately, we have to make a decision. And that decision is not what, individuals think, but the information that we've garnered, how we go through that, and how we represent our community in the best interest. I'm a little more comfortable with, as my fellow commissioner here, so with the county driving this, not unilaterally, but with the pieces that have all the work that's been put into place. Because this is one event, but we represent all of Lee County today, tomorrow, and for the years to come. The decisions we make, some are near-term decisions, and some are long-term decisions. And that's that balancing act that we have. And I think that's the challenge. I'm probably the newest guy, well, maybe me, the outfielder here in government, and so on and so forth. So very proud of all the work that's been done. I think, in summary, I just think that, we have to do what's in the best interest of Lee County, and that's all of us. And I think, we need to be more actively involved in the driver's seat, for what it's worth. And the only other thing, too, is we went back to the neighborhoods, and I've been through Iona a number of different times, and I want to put another plug in there selfishly. Good people down there are suffering a lot.
Commissioner Greenwell, then Pendergrass?
Yeah, Chairman, thank you. Kevin, I missed that part. I really want to say thank you for all you did doing this and taking the time. You put a great group of people together and been really involved in the community doing it. I just think that, just like we're talking about, just tweaking it a little bit will make all this better, how we move forward in the future. But there's no question, when you did this, I remember walking by you and saying, thank you for taking this on, but boy, I hope you realize what you're getting into, and you've taken it like a man, so I want to thank you for that. So.
Yeah, I want to thank, like Commissioner Green wants to thank the task force and Commissioner Wayne and everything they've done. We can't do this alone. We have to be together on this, and that's the most important thing. We need to be driving, everybody going in the same direction, and that's why I think we need to have this conversation to get more information out there. We learn what's going on, and the task force can learn where we are with this. And as far as the clarity of paying for something, I can tell you from sitting here for a few years now that when you do projects with the cities, we've been asked, I can start right here downtown, Harborside, we did recommendations for Harborside downtown, where we want to pay $4 million for that. Midtown, there's money coming from the cities will continue, and all the city managers are listening right now. And I go back to Sterl Parkway, we did the joint sidewalk repaving down there, the city of Village of Sterl, from our beach, the Sterl Boulevard. So anytime you get involved, that's why I really support the cities that have their home rule and let them be the driving force behind this project. We may not be paying for it up front, but there will be an ask, I will tell you guys. And that you can go look back, and many years, Mr. Hammond, we paid for a lot of these projects in the city. So that's where I was referring to. There will be an ask for us later if we're involved. Anywhere involved with interjecting that conversation, suggesting a project within their jurisdiction, there will be asked. And I don't blame them for that, because they're trying to obviously get what they can for their community. But they represent those cities, and they're the best ones to represent those cities and they know what they want. I remember having the discussion with prior Cape Coral Council when the DOT was about doing a flyover of one of the roads there coming off the bridge, and they did not want that, and I support it. Benita Springs, the same thing, no flyover 41 of Beach Road. There's a reason why we have that interaction, why we respect the home rule. But again, we have to work together on this, that's for sure. But like the others said, I think it's best for staff to be driving this. Like today, I heard Tesla say the project list down to 85 projects now, initiatives. So I would love to know what those 85 initiatives are so we can see what's coming forward before December. And I was hoping to see that today so we can say, yeah, and that's my question to you, Dave, is when it comes forward in December, if there's something we don't like about the project list, can we pick and choose off of that? Or and also about how we pay for that, because if staff's more involved, that might save us some money. And my goal at the end of the day is get money back to the community. We still have, like Commissioner Sinelli said, we have people that hurt. We have still people sleeping in their cars. There's still people waiting to get drywall in their house. There's still people sleeping on the roofs down Forest Beach because they can't get a project built because cities or counties aren't doing the land development code amendments yet. So we have a lot of people that are still suffering, and we need to get that money to those people that is in need right now.
One more thing, and that's, you can see all the work that's been put together. And I've been to a couple of meetings, and I've been very impressed with the input. But when you start talking about process takes time, and time is the enemy here to some degree, because people are suffering today. So there are things that we have to expedite in deference to the needs today, but also plan for the long term.
Dave, did you have a comment you wanted to make? Hit your mic.
In response to the Commissioner, I believe when a plan comes before you, the board has the discretion to accept it, to send it back for review or amendment, or outright denial. So those would be the options that would come forward. I think the important piece is if there is an outright denial, then it would no longer be funded through CDBG-DR.
And then we're paying for that then, right?
Correct, through the general fund.
So if we deny it, so everybody understands here, we deny it, we're paying out of the county coffers, not the other money, correct?
Correct.
And I don't think it's fair to the people that spent the last 6 months, 8 months working on this either, to provide a product to us and us deny it because there's one project or one initiative there we don't accept or agree with. And that's my concern with that.
Real quick, I know Commissioner Rain, do you want to chime in on the conversation too? I know you've been trying to get my attention. And before you speak, real quick, I just wanted to echo what everybody else said too about thank you for the time and effort you put into this, the people you've appointed to this for their time and effort as well. It is a Herculean task. It's an amazing task, and I thank you for taking it on your shoulders as the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Listen, we sat in the EOC day 1, day 2, and I didn't know people from Hurricane Michael. I didn't know people from Bay County, and all of a sudden there's some gentleman that give me this 500-page book and say, here's your plan. And I'm like, okay. And again, from there, it just was an evolution. I mean, to me, I don't know if it was just having been involved in 9/11 and participated there, having been involved when I came here from Charlie. I don't know. I run to the fire. I don't run away from it. To me, I look at my district, and if I put Ray's district in my district, we have 90% of the damage. So how do you do this, and what's the best way? I listen to others. I mean, New York has a plan, Bay County had a plan, and just trying to put together, very quickly, how do we recover? And I think staff needs to be engaged, and where my confusion is having run 7 companies and employed 500 people, when I hire an independent, they're just an extension of my company. They're not so that distant from my company. So maybe we can have more of a interaction between the subcontractors that we've hired. I mean, we approve them to have that, so we don't get to where Commissioner Pendergrass has anxiety, and I do too, that there's items on here that don't make sense. And if there's ever a time to tighten it up, it's now, between now and then. Secondarily, the neighborhood plans, I was not here in July. So I didn't even know a meeting ago, my colleague was talking about neighborhood plans, and I'm like, what the hell's a neighborhood plan? You know, because again, I was trying to play catch up. You know, I had personal issues, you all know, and trying to deal with that. And then today, I see it on the agenda. I'm like, I talked to the county manager yesterday. I'm like, we can't approve this. How do we do this? Because to neighborhood plans, which ones do we include? How many? What's left? Whatever. And I go back to the original memo to Matt Caldwell. How do you do this? And again, focusing on the parcels that were damaged were my concerns. Again, it's the advisory committee to make the best regional approach to how do we recover the quickest. And that's kind of where I was focused on. I think there's a lot of things we've done here, and I can't thank the citizenry and the people that have put their time and energy in, because this is no different if you read the Bay County plan and what took place, whether it's here or Sandy or any other disaster. Is it perfect? I don't know how you write a perfect plan for a Category 5, but we are where we are, and I can't thank the people enough. And I really mean that from the bottom of my heart. We just have more work to do, and meetings like this is really helpful because the 5 of us enable us to do that. We're going to blink, and we're going to start talking about next session. I mean, we have a local delegation meeting in October. So what's our priorities? How do we, get that? And we seem to gloss over the fact that the first page, we got $3 billion. I mean, $3 billion. I mean, bridges and, you think about what we were able to do. I guess the question I've always asked myself, what happened if we didn't get that funding? Where would we come up with money for bridges? Where would we come up with that? So those are the things I try to stay positive on. If we can have some takeaway from this, a tighter communication and working between staff and our consultants so we're on the same page, maybe start to incorporate us more frequently, and I'm thrilled that we had this meeting and would certainly welcome to have more meetings more frequently so we don't miss the opportunity at all. And maybe we need a further clarification on neighborhood plans, because I didn't hear anyone really understand what should or shouldn't be in a neighborhood plan. And I'm glad today we deferred that item, because I'm no more certain on that item even after this presentation. So there needs to be some additional work.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
And I think for me, where I started getting confused when I've been through, as you have, been through my district, and I know where some of the hurt is. And I didn't see the list until probably early this week, so I was a little caught off guard as well. But two things I want to make. One is this date in December, was it December 5th or something? Is that flexible? Is that a hard date? I heard it was a self-imposed date. The only reason I ask is, does it give us some flexibility as we work through these, and we need that?
The December 5th date, is that, Dave, you want to answer that question?
I believe the date is flexible. It was arbitrary date, yeah.
You all just, was part of the creation of the Recovery Task Force, so I believe you all can change the date.
Because I think it's important the product is right, and we don't get boxed in by a date if it's, in fact, arbitrary. And I'm going to make a comment that if Ruane's as good as we think he is, can you get us back to the building without getting soaked? Because it's really raining out there.
I know, and I was,
Mr. Pendergrass?
Again, as I said earlier, this is great we're having this conversation, and it's really not fair that, thank Kevin for stepping up and doing this, but I just don't want to, months from now, he still has all this workload. Is this a county issue? Like, and Commissioner Wayne said, it occurred, we're not district, single member district, so it's county-wide issues here. A lot of damage occurred in the area, but everybody in Lee County was impacted by the storm in some way, economically, or they lost their house, or they still lost their house, their home. But how can we be more involved too? I know we have to follow sunshine, where the board alone can be more involved. So we're actually informed of what's going on, working with staff. So as this moves forward, we get a final product that we can support without us being surprised at the last minute by something. And it's not fair to Commissioner Wayne or one person or one group to say, we don't like it because of this, because it's, at the end of the day, it's all going to be all of us voting for this. So it doesn't really matter a year from now who brought it forward. And I just want to make sure we get a product that we can't accept. If we don't accept it, we're paying for it out of local tax dollars. So, again, I think we all should somehow, how we all can be involved. I attend some meetings when I can, but we all can't attend and be involved in engagement unless we advertise it, county attorney, I believe, unless it's because of sunshine. So something, if anybody else wants to comment on that, how we can be more involved.
I think, you know, hearing what everybody said, I'm really glad. I think I've heard the same thing from every one of us then. And Commissioner Ruane, I love the way you even said it too. Integration, right? Integration is the word. I've seen our county do pretty amazing things over the last nearly 10 years now with this one org philosophy, right? No matter what department you come from, no matter what your day-to-day responsibilities are, we come together as one organization to do the work of the people here and make sure we serve them the best we can. And so that is my desire here too, based on all the feedback that I've heard from you as well. I feel like we're all on the same page. Let's get to one org here. Let's integrate this fully with our county staff and our contractor who we've hired to do this project for us. That kind of is really interesting to me that we're and you can tell that obviously things aren't integrated because we couldn't even present together. We had to have two separate presentations here, and that's kind of evidence to me that there's a gap that needs to be closed here. And so I would assume that if we're as a county going to hire a contractor to do a task for us, and that is the task force here, we would integrate and we would make sure that our team is managing that project as the county commission has directed them to carry out that project. I think the good thing was you answered my question today on what is the work project, or work product rather. The deliverable then, it sounds like, is going to be a report of these 85 initiatives that you've fleshed out, and you're going to deliver them in that way. And then what do we do with the work project? I guess that's what the work product, rather, the deliverable. What do we do with that? We're going to use it to try and gain as much money and appropriations as we can to help accomplish these tasks, right? From federal, state, and local resources. Is that the right answer on that?
I mean, Mr. Chairman, I think, what we've identified are the projects that are required for our recovery, and have experts to identify the funding sources that may be available. And then the 5 of us as advocates, maybe we just say, okay, we got 20 projects and you take 4, and we go about it, or we gang tackle, do it together. But that's the object. I always thought, I honestly never thought day 2 that we'd have this type of participation. I just knew that we just went through one of the most costliest storms, and maybe the most costliest storm. And how do we recover? Because I looked at a balance sheet that we had, and we'd have enough money. So how do you do that? And at the end of the day, I like your word integration. I also would like clarity on neighborhoods, because I think there's no real consensus here whatsoever. And then kind of just look at maybe the next 90 days. And Chris and Dave used to do these weekly updates, and maybe somehow integrate some of that with the commissioners so we're more in line with what's taking place.
Yeah.
And maybe some clarity.
I love these workshops because it gives us the opportunity to actually talk to each other instead of like when we're on the dais, you have to run everything through the chair and everything like that. So I'm just going to kind of talk and share my thoughts on the neighborhood plans as I heard it. I think if you're going to do a project that's that large, that's going to require that amount of money, it probably needs to be competitively bid, have multiple people have an opportunity at that contract and that project. I also did like what I heard from Commissioner Pendergrass about the idea that there are planning dollars available for the cities to apply for to try and do their own planning projects. And it does kind of, I agree, that home rule where the cities would kind of drive the planning projects for the areas within their cities probably makes, it probably relates better to how normal business is conducted anyways. We don't go into Cape Coral and say, hey, we want to take 8 square blocks and have the whole region plan that 8 square blocks. It's Cape Coral that does its own land use, and not the region that does that. So I think that makes sense to me if we wanted to maybe separate out the neighborhood project or neighborhood plans project as a completely different project and either competitively bid it out or handle it a different way through the CDBG-DR planning process. Commissioner Sandelli?
Well, I was kind of on the neighborhoods, and that's where I got a little bit lost in reading the report. They started talking about economic development. That's an important piece, long-term development. But I keep going back to the near-term needs, and so I don't want the long-term things and those for that ambitious stuff to get lost in the near-term needs.
Good deal. Any further comments, discussion, questions? No? Let me turn it back to our county manager.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. If I may, I'd like to make a few suggestions as we move forward, so it might be a little easier for staff. First of all, a little clarity for us. There is a process already established through emergency management. It's a national standard for a long-term recovery plan. I'm not saying change the rules. I'm not saying change what we're doing. But is that something we're talking about when we're talking about staff coordinating this? I think if that's the case, if we can get back to staff coordinating like we would do through CDBGR, ARPA, and CARES, we would be able to come back to you like we do in any normal process, like we just recently did with the CARES program. I mean the CDBGR program, where we're implementing what the board's direction is, and moving forward, we can have the discussion. We can incorporate all these components, including the task force and the branches, keep it going as is. I guess my question is, do you want it to be led like we normally lead the other programs and incorporate these components, continue to have that community input, have Hagerty support the effort? Is that what you're saying through this process?
Yes.
Yes, just a follow-up, Dave. Do you need, I mean, I look at the branches as being a conduit of identifying the items that, the list of items that need to be replaced, repaired, or made better for resiliency. Do you have enough staff to do that type of survey, or can you work in augment with them?
I believe we'd be working in augment with Hagerty and whoever else is in the branches. Okay. But we do, through the EM process, all the municipalities would be involved in that process anyway. So we're not changing the makeup, we're not changing the public input. I think we're just changing the mechanism of how it's driven and your expectations. Okay, so we just wanted to make sure it was set up like what we've done in the past with all our other programs, that you expect us to come forward and address that and bring the information to you on a regular basis like we do through the workshops and through presentations to the board.
Yeah. I like what Mike Martin said about sausage making. So the sausage making is still going to happen at the branch meetings and then filter up to the task force, but there'll just be more integration with our staff and with the county commissioners and that.
Love it.
Okay.
And is there consensus about neighborhood plans that we need to kind of understand that a little bit better? Unless I'm somewhat confused on it.
I shared my thought, but I'd love to hear from you all what you're...
I just think it's something we need to, I mean, I couldn't today think about approving, forget about the neighborhood, even I don't have no feel for what we're doing. I mean, I need to have greater clarity. We're going to allocate $5 million, and I want to make sure we include the entire county. I don't know how to separate the items. So that's just my 2 cents.
Commissioner Greenwell.
Chairman, it's something that obviously I've just talked to staff about recently after visiting with, discussing with staff after being out with Lehigh and talking about the growth out there and how we can make it better. So obviously trying to, being a district that is growing like crazy. I mean, it's unbelievable the growth that's coming out by our area. And I think we have a unique opportunity as a county and as a staff to get ahead of it, start planning. We know State Road 31 is going to get 4-lane and 6-lane. We know Bayshore Road's going to do that. We know State Road 80 is exploding with the amount of traffic. So we have a unique opportunity out there. So as far as planning and trying to look at your area and say, how can we make it better? It's a great time for me as a commissioner to approach staff and say, show me a plan. We've got to get ahead of this. We want to make sure that we can help businesses. One of the things I hear the most from like Lehigh is, we don't have businesses. Where are the businesses? Well, we have opportunity to figure out how to help those businesses get there. So I love being a commissioner for that reason. I think we have an opportunity to do that throughout the county. So I do think that us planning better makes a lot of sense. Just wanted to get that.
Everybody left the beaches and going out east now. That's why everybody's moving to Babcock and out east now, is because the people that lost their homes and out there. But for example, you're talking about Palm Beach Boulevard, the economic impact there along Palm Beach Boulevard. That's something we have to look at long term as far as like the development, the zoning, the right of way there along Palm Beach Boulevard 80. You'll see new development up there with the expansion of Veranda, River Hall, Babcock. You're going to see the commerce out there, but you have to see the face of that whole Palm Beach Boulevard area change.
You know, I'm fortunate to live right there and watch a city be built.
Yeah.
I mean, we're building a city, and it's amazing. You know, 35 years ago when I moved out there, I could pull out and maybe wait on one car. Now I have to go right to turn left now. It's crazy.
Not for long. 6 lanes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When we're talking about neighborhood plans, I think our plan would be to come back to you sometime in September. We have 2 board meetings in September. To come back to you in September to talk to you about moving forward. We have a date that we can play with on December 5th, and then we can bring back some information regarding the neighborhood plans like we would normally do through any other process, and you can give us direction on how you'd like for us to move forward with that piece. So if that works for you, I can't give you a date in September yet. We have to meet. We have some time to meet with folks and get everything organized, but sometime in September we can come back.
That sounds perfect. I appreciate the chairman and the integration and staff really trying to lead, but use obviously Haggerty and Collaboratory because they've done such a great job, as you've indicated, make the sausage or keep intact, and you just now somewhat, oversee and make sure we're all engaged. But I love integration. I love the neighborhood concept at Euro and Clarity, because it was really a challenge today to look at that item as I prepped over the weekend saying, what are we doing? And I want to do what, we all are collectively, because collectively, as the chairman has said, we're much better as a unit when the 5 of us put our heads together and we come up with the outcome. But thank you for putting this together. Great job.
Close on a really positive note, if you indulge me just for a second. We talked about roads, we talked about money, we talked about programs, so on and so forth. When the storm hit, there was a group of people on Fort Myers Beach that went into Publix and in emergency mode took some stuff out of there just to survive. When Publix finally opened, that same group made a list of what was taken, wrote a check, and gave it to the manager of the store. That's who we are as a community. That's the kind of people we are. So we can talk about all these things. The greatest gift we have is who we are as a community. So I'm a little biased to that group. Thanks.
Workshop. I want to say thank you to everybody who took part in it today. Thank you to the branch members who came today and the task force members who came today as well. And thank you again for all your efforts and the team. Good team. Anything else before us then, Mr. Hunter?
No, thank you.
All right. Seeing no further business before us, we are adjourned.